Hi, I'm Ken Kammer. I'm the curator of mammals at the Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium.
Ken, when someone says the word pangolin, most people look at you and go, penguin? So, what is a pangolin?
A pangolin is a very unique animal. It is the only truly scaled mammal. That means that it has scales covering most of its body. And we find these animals in both Africa and Asia.
Now, one of the distinctions of it, you said it's a unique animal and it's different. But one of the major distinctions of it, and more people are starting to take notice, is it is the world's most trafficked animal.
The pangolin is the most trafficked animal in the world, meaning that it has been illegally hunted or poached and used for what we call bush meat, which is meat that's been captured out of the wild to be consumed by people, but not just in the regions where you find the animals, but shipped to markets throughout the world. And in addition, the scales on the pangolins have been illegally used for grinding up into medicines or to be used for jewelry. And these scales are actually the same as your fingernails or your hair. It's made of a material called keratin. And keratin has no proven scientific usage for either medicine or has no curative properties. So it's a false folk belief that material from the scales will help cure you. It's especially utilized in traditional Asian medicines, but unfortunately, it does not work to provide health benefits, and so unfortunately it's killing all these animals by the millions, and causing all the species around the world to go extinct.
How was it first brought to light that they were so trafficked and that their populations are declining? Was there some study done, or how did they determine, or how did they find out about this animal?
Well, what they've been finding is they've been uncovering illegal and hidden bags by the tons of scales or bodies that are hidden away in ships and planes, all bound for the Asian markets. And the animals that they used to find in Asia, they're not finding anymore because they've wiped out so many of them. All pangolins, of which there are 4 species in Asia and 4 in Africa, are now on the endangered list by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And because they're small animals, they range from about the size of a cat to as big as maybe a beach ball, depending on the species. But they're very easy to catch. These are incredibly unique, neat animals, and they are basically unchanged from millions of years ago. And when they are threatened by natural predators, like a big cat or something like that, they simply roll into a ball, very similar to what an armadillo does. And the scales on its body and the tail wraps around, covering its head. And they're like this little ball. And with this scaly covering, predators can't hurt them or kill them. And they'll stay this way sometimes for hours until they sense that the predator is gone. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, that also makes it easy for people to simply pick one up. And then it's either destined for somebody's dinner or stew pot, or really the case is that they are killed or shipped in mass illegally to these foreign markets.
Now, how did it come to light, and what led to the Pittsburgh Zoo and PPG Aquarium's involvement in it? Can you give us like a little brief history of how we became involved in what we're doing?
Well, the Pittsburgh Zoo has a mission of helping to conserve endangered species. And an opportunity came to work with a consortium of other zoos and a private organization to work with African white-bellied tree pangolins, which come from the western coast of Africa. And we did this a couple of years ago. This was an opportunity before they were listed as being endangered to develop a population that we could study and research. And there's so much that we and other zoos can do that you can't do in the wild. But find these things out in our zoos that we can give to other scientists to use to help them in the wild. So a few years ago we worked with the private organization Pangolin Consortium, and the founder of that organization worked in Togo, country in Western Africa, for several years. He developed, with help from nutritionists and experts in the United States, part of the consortium, to develop a diet that was so important to this whole program, because in the past they have not done well in captivity because people didn't know how to properly feed them. They, in the wild, feed primarily on ants, termites, other insects, and you just can't go down to the supermarket and pick up a can of ants. Mm-hmm. So we had to develop a diet that would work here in the United States, and these people did that over several years. Found sources of insects, meaning that there were actually places that grew certain types of insects, fly larvae, mealworms, silkworm, and so on, that could mix together with a bunch of different ingredients and form this cake that they would like and eat. And the Pangolin Conservation founder did this in Africa first, making sure that the animals that normally would have gone to somebody's stew pot, he was able to trade some chickens for these animals. He didn't just go through and start collecting all these and putting pressure on the population. These are animals that would have died anyway. Mm-hmm. So, but he was able to save them, try them out on the new diet, give them some medicines if they needed it. And then from those, once he was convinced that they could manage in the conditions that he had them, the captive conditions that he had them in Togo, then they were shipped over to the United States to 6 different zoos, including the Pittsburgh Zoo, back in 2016. And since then, we've had our animals. We have 3 animals right now. We've got 2 females and a male.
Okay, so how is our program going? What are we doing? I know that you want to study them. The more information you can learn. So tell us about the 3 that we have. You said we have 2 females, 1 male.
That's correct. We've got 2 females and a male, white-bellied tree pangolins. One of the 4 species in Africa. This particular species likes to live in the trees, although you'll sometimes find it on the ground. It has a very long tail, which is prehensile, and what that means is that the tail is able to grasp onto tree branches and hold the body up. So they use the tail to help them climb throughout trees. They have on their front feet very long nails, which allows them to dig into ant nests and termite mounds for insects. And they have a very long tongue. This tongue is anywhere from 15, 16 inches longer than its body. And we're only talking, this little animal is about so big. And then the tail is even, makes it even bigger. But the tongue is as big as the body, which is amazing. And they put this tongue out and slurp up all these ants. They can eat an incredible number of ants in the wild. Ants are termites. But we had to find something that they would eat here, and that's where we came up with the diet. There's 14 ingredients. Our keepers have to make this about every week to 2 weeks. It takes them a good hour and a half. They make a cake out of these 14 ingredients. They have this soup a liquid soup of agar, and mix it all in, and it comes out as a cake. And then they put it into the refrigerator, let it settle like gelatin, and then they cut it up. And the animals each animal gets about a cup and a half of this a day over a couple of different feedings. And they've done very well. They like it. We'll occasionally sprinkle some ants onto it, some dried ants that we've gotten from some other sources. And they've done very well on it. We measure how much food they eat every single day, how much food they're given, how much food they leave, and then at least once a week we weigh them. And our veterinarians, as well as the veterinarians throughout the institutions of the Pangolin Consortium, are taking regular physiological measurements and biological samples, which are very important because there hasn't been much information on this species. And we're comparing all this information, so building a database that has never been done before. And we can in turn share this database with field conservationists and researchers for this species and others. A lot of these come into rehabilitation centers and they're in bad shape. So having some information from good, healthy animals is very important for those people to know what are the normal health standards for a pangolin. So all of this information that we're gathering can be used to help their cousins back in the wild or those that come into rehabilitation centers.
Now, what kind of interesting things have you learned so far? And I'm sure the consortium shares everything, but just say from our perspective, what have you learned that was kind of unique, different, that you weren't expecting?
Well, you see these animals, and of course they have a very pointed face, and so of course there's not really, they don't have facial muscles like we do, not much in the way of expression or anything like that. But one of the interesting things is that each animal is an individual. Each animal has a personality, and this is reported from every zoo as to what one animal does versus another. And some are very active, some are very curious, some like to sleep in their blankets better part of the day. One of the amazing things is that these animals are actually nocturnal, meaning that they are active at night. We here keep them on a natural light cycle. Some of the zoos keep them on what we call a reversed light cycle, where during our daytime they have them in a room where it is dark. But we keep them on a natural light cycle, so oftentimes we don't see them moving too much during the daytime. They're sleeping as they would naturally. But we have cameras that we can follow them at night. And so when you follow them on cameras, you see them moving all over the place throughout. And when we come in the morning, they've got a nice big bowl of food. It's gone. So they're happily munching. We provide them different types of what we call enrichment things to keep them active, to simulate some of the natural activities they would do. But they've done well in their areas, and with the 2 females and male, we're planning on introducing them this year for mating. And in some of the other consortium institutions, they've had success in breeding these animals. I think there's been all total at least about 10 births. Some of those were from the wild, but some have been conceived since they've been in the United States. So, and that's not been done in the past. And in fact, we didn't even know what the normal gestation was for these animals. So these are details that we can find out for them in zoos that they can't do in the wild.
Now, the zoo has also reached out to the local university, Duquesne University. What are you doing with them too? I mean, how are you working together to find out additional information about pangolins?
Yes, we work with Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and we work with Dr. Jan Janeška, who is a geneticist. And for all the consortium, we are heading up a genetics research study. It's unusual, and we're very fortunate in that we know every location within feet of where these animals came from in their native country. And so through taking minor blood samples that we take anyway during examinations, or taking scale samples or hair, you can get a DNA profile for that individual. You can compare that to every other animal that is in the consortium, and you can determine who's related to who. And that's unprecedented, having that much information from the start to be able to determine. So if, for example, we have some animals from this part of the country and some animals from, even 5 miles away, we'll be able to determine through genetics if they're related or if they're totally unrelated. And not that we expect that they would, but you don't know. And that's almost unprecedented in having that much information. We'll also be able to use the genetic information to compare to other populations, and even as they to help wildlife authorities as they recover specimens, or they find supplies of pangolins that have been shipped away. We can compare our genetics from our animals to what they find to help determine where the illegal animals came from.
Okay. When you share this information with groups in the wild that are working to save pangolins that are over there, how is that going to help them prevent this animal from being, well, the most trafficked animal, but also to start building those declining populations that we're seeing?
Well, there's a number of ways that we can help in conservation of pangolins. And one of the things that zoos do best is, just like this interview, we can use either through people visiting and seeing pangolins at a zoo, or through digital media or other communication, we can reach millions of people. We can show them what a pangolin is, and that there's a difference between a pangolin and a penguin. We can actually show both of them here. But people won't save that which they don't understand. And this is a step in reaching to millions of people and giving a message that these are important animals on our earth that need to be saved. And if you can help save these animals, especially in their natural environment, you can save a whole ecosystem with other animals in that area, and why it's important. And so that's one role that we have is education and awareness. The research that we do, learning about these animals, how to take care of them. We're putting together a pangolin care manual on all the things that we've learned in taking care of these animals and introducing them for breeding and taking care of baby animals and the diet and all the physiological parameters. All of that information will be invaluable to a lot of the rehabilitation centers in Africa that get these animals. And if they, again, can have a document which says these are normal values, and if there are abnormal problems with your animal, here are some medicines you can use, or here are some techniques that you can do to help save them. Then in addition, one of our goals is conservation. So the consortium, including the Pittsburgh Zoo, is supporting a Pangolin Consortium conservation fund, and this is for any biologist or conservationist that have projects worldwide on researching or conserving pangolins. They can apply for grants every year to us to try to help their project. And finally, it's very important for us to share our information. So the Pangolin Consortium is holding the first international symposium on pangolin care and conservation this coming summer in Chicago, Illinois, where we will invite in researchers and people from all across the world interested in helping pangolins, and be presenting the latest scientific findings and comparing notes and deciding how we can best collaborate on actions to help conserve these neat animals.
Mm-hmm. Now, if people wanted to learn more about pangolins, where would you recommend they get their information from?
There's a number of good sources out there. Websites include pangolinconservation.org. That organization is actually the founding member of the Pangolin Consortium and have an excellent website. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature Pangolin Specialist Group is a very good organization, a collaboration of scientists from across the world that are all working together to try to save pangolins worldwide. And you go to their website, then that is a good source of information. There are other organizations such as SavePangolin.org, SaveVietnamWildlife.org. If you just Google pangolin conservation organizations, you can find a number of good conservation organizations.
Okay, not to trivialize it or dumb it down, but do you think you'll win the war here? And when I say win the war, I mean start to be able to really build up their populations in the wild while educating people here.
It's a continual battle to stave off extinction of any of these rare and endangered species. And it takes, again, collaboration amongst many, many people working together to learn, to understand, to share their findings, to alert the public that these animals are important. Even though they're in Africa, they are still important to the whole ecosystem of this planet. And it's going to take many, many years of continued efforts to hopefully do the best that we can to help save these little guys. So we're just one part of that, and we're going to do everything that we can to help take care of them.